deal?
You mean to tell me that you've been putting it over on me with some other man?
Yes, and what are you gonna do about it, you big gas bag?
Here, you tell me who it is or I'll break every bone.
For all the glamour and prestige of Hollywood's golden age, there were secrets the studios worked desperately to hide. From brutal murders to mysterious disappearances, here are 13 unbelievable scandals Hollywood stars were accused of.
My husband. I'm Ginny's husband. I was a soldier. I conked out.
Number 13. Paul Kelly. Paul Kelly was a man of contradictions, a Hollywood star with the knack for playing charming but morally ambiguous characters on screen. But off-screen, his life was marred by violent outbursts and a criminal past that would overshadow his career. In the late 1920s, Kelly's fame took a serious hit when he was arrested for a crime that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was convicted of manslaughter in 1927 after a violent altercation with a man named John B. O'Neill. The incident occurred when Kelly allegedly got into a heated argument with O'Neill over a woman. The fight escalated quickly, and Kelly, who was no stranger to aggression, struck O'Neill with a fatal blow. The consequences were swift, and Kelly was sentenced to prison for several years. While serving time, Kelly's career took a steep dive. When he finally got out of prison, Hollywood was hesitant to welcome him back. His past was too stained, and his reputation had been permanently tarnished. But Kelly was nothing if not determined. He clawed his way back into the industry, albeit in smaller, less glamorous roles. His return to the screen, though, was always overshadowed by his criminal history. Audiences couldn't quite separate the man from the character, and the shadow of the crime he had committed loomed over him. Despite this, Kelly did manage to build a respectable career over the years, even though he could never quite shake his past. His life remained turbulent, with several more run-ins with the law, but he continued to work until his death in 1956.
A deal.
You mean to tell me that you've been putting it over on me with some other man?
Yes, and what are you gonna do about it, you big gas bag?
Here, you tell me who it is or I'll break every bone.
Number 12. Wallace Beery. As a larger-than-life actor known for his gruff charm and commanding presence, Wallace Beery was one of the most successful stars of Hollywood's golden age. But despite his success, Beery's off-screen life was often far more tumultuous, filled with personal battles and a scandal that would echo through the tabloids for years. We would trace this to the late 1920s when Beery's career took a sharp turn from the silver screen to the courtrooms. His scandalous encounter with a woman named Barbara Stanwyck set Hollywood on fire. The two were said to have been romantically involved at one point, but things turned sour in a very public way. Beery, who was known for his fierce temper, reportedly had a violent outburst when he learned that Stanwyck was involved with another man. While the details of the argument remain unclear, it was said that Beery's temper boiled over into violence, and the altercation escalated to such an extent that police were called to the scene. His reputation as a volatile, hot-headed star was solidified after the incident, and the tabloids had a field day, portraying him as a man on the edge, unable to control his anger. The scandal tarnished his image, and though he would go on to work in numerous films, the public's perception of him had shifted. Beery's reputation for unruly behavior became legendary, and the press didn't shy away from highlighting his struggles with alcohol and his infamous temper.
He was so short that they used to have to dig a ditch for the girls to stand in to kiss him. You didn't know that.
Number 11. Robert Blake. Robert Blake had spent his life playing tough guys, but on the night of May 4th, 2001, the line between Hollywood and reality blurred in the worst possible way. That evening, Blake and his wife, Bonnie Lee Bakley, had dinner at Vitello's, an Italian restaurant in Studio City. They were an unusual couple. Blake, a former child star turned respected actor, was best known for Beretta, a gritty cop show from the 1970s. Bonnie, on the other hand, had a history of chasing wealthy and famous men. Their marriage had been rocky from the start, with Blake insisting that she had tricked him into fatherhood. After finishing their meal, the couple walked back to their car, a black Dodge Stealth parked a short distance away. Then, Blake claimed he had to return to the restaurant. He had left his gun inside. When he came back, he found Bonnie slumped over in the passenger seat, shot twice in the head. She was dead. Blake was immediately a suspect. His alibi, that he just happened to leave his gun behind moments before the shooting, was shaky at best. But police didn't have the murder weapon, and Blake denied any involvement. Then came the witnesses. Two stuntmen, longtime acquaintances of Blake, told investigators that he had approached them months before, asking if they could take care of Bonnie. He allegedly wanted her out of his life permanently. Still, there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. When Blake was finally arrested in 2002, the trial became a media circus. Prosecutors painted him as a desperate man stuck in a marriage he never wanted. The defense argued there was no hard proof, just hearsay and speculation. In 2005, after a highly publicized trial, the jury found Blake not guilty of murder. It was a shocking verdict considering the damning testimonies, but the lack of direct evidence left enough doubt. However, a civil trial later found him liable for Bonnie's death, ordering him to pay $30 million to her children, a judgment that effectively bankrupted him. Blake always maintained his innocence. But whether he pulled the trigger or not, his Hollywood legacy was forever overshadowed by the mystery that left one woman dead and a once-beloved actor disgraced. Number 10. John Drew Barrymore. John Drew Barrymore was born into Hollywood royalty, but instead of following the well-lit path of his famous father, John Barrymore, he took a darker road, one lined with missed opportunities, arrests, and a reputation for self-destruction. By the 1950s, he had all the makings of a star: striking looks, a famous name, and raw talent. But unlike his father, who was a celebrated stage and screen actor, John Drew seemed more interested in rebellion than in building a career. His film roles became sporadic, and soon he was better known for his off-screen antics than his acting. Alcohol and drugs fueled his troubles, and as the years passed, the headlines weren't about his performances, but his arrests. Drunk driving, public intoxication, drug possession. His rap sheet grew longer while his career faded. One of his most infamous run-ins with the law came in the 1960s when he disappeared just before he was set to film an episode of Wagon Train, a popular TV western. The producers had already had enough of his unreliability, but this time he was in serious trouble. He had skipped town entirely, violating his contract. The studio was furious and took legal action, effectively blacklisting him from Hollywood. By the 1970s, he had completely spiraled. He spent time in jail for various offenses, including violent outbursts and probation violations. His once promising future was now just a series of mugshots and court appearances. Unlike his father, who had been celebrated even in his decline, John Drew Barrymore became a cautionary tale, a man who had everything but threw it away. Even his family, including his daughter Drew Barrymore, later spoke about his troubled legacy with sadness rather than reverence. In the end, he became one of Hollywood's lost souls, a reminder that talent and lineage can only take you so far. The rest is up to you, and for John Drew Barrymore, the choices he made led him down a path he never found his way back from. Number 9. Walter Wanger. The gunshot rang out in the parking lot of United Artists Studios, piercing the calm Los Angeles evening. When the commotion settled, Hollywood producer Walter Wanger stood with a smoking pistol, and his wife's agent, Jennings Lang, lay bleeding from a gunshot wound to the groin. Wanger wasn't just any producer. He was a powerful force in the industry, responsible for classics like Stagecoach and Foreign Correspondent. His wife, Joan Bennett, was a glamorous actress known for her roles in noir films. Together, they had been a Hollywood power couple, but behind closed doors, their marriage was crumbling. For months, Wanger had been suspicious. Joan was spending an unusual amount of time with her agent, Lang. Meetings ran late, lunches stretched into the afternoons, and there was an intimacy between them that Wanger couldn't ignore. He tried to brush it off, but the whispers in Hollywood grew louder. Then, on December 13, 1951, Wanger decided to catch them in the act. That afternoon, he drove to the studio, parked outside, and waited. When Joan and Lang finally emerged, talking and laughing, Wanger saw red. He approached Lang, pulled out a .38 caliber pistol, and fired 2 shots. One bullet struck Lang in the thigh, the other grazed his groin. Lang collapsed, writhing in pain, while Wanger calmly handed his gun to a nearby security guard. "I shot him because he was breaking up my home," Wanger reportedly said as the police arrived. He was arrested on the spot. The trial was a sensation. Wanger, facing serious charges, pleaded temporary insanity. Joan stood by him, publicly downplaying her relationship with Lang. In the end, the judge showed leniency. Rather than prison, Wanger served just 4 months in jail and was released on good behavior. His career took a hit, but he wasn't finished. He rebounded with Riot in Cell Block 11, ironically inspired by his time behind bars. Joan and Wanger stayed together for another decade before quietly divorcing. As for Lang, he survived, but was forever linked to one of Hollywood's most scandalous crimes of passion, a moment of jealousy that turned into gunfire in the heart of Tinseltown.
What do you want? Yeah?
Number 8. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum was the brooding and rugged star who became an icon of 1940s and 50s cinema. He seemed to have it all. With his tough guy persona, he was cast in gritty noirs and westerns, often playing anti-heroes who oozed a kind of cool detachment. But behind the screen, Mitchum's real-life run-in with the law would be almost as infamous as his on-screen characters. In 1948, while his career was on the rise, Mitchum found himself entangled in a scandal that would nearly end his acting career. It all started when he was arrested for marijuana possession in a Hollywood bust that would forever tarnish his public image. Mitchum, known for his easygoing nature, was caught in a house in the heart of Tinseltown with a small amount of marijuana. The police raid came at a time when the public's moral outrage towards drug use was reaching a fever pitch, and Mitchum was immediately labeled a criminal. At his trial, Mitchum faced the kind of intense media scrutiny that only Hollywood's brightest stars could experience. The press turned it into a circus, sensationalizing his arrest and turning him into a symbol of all that was wrong with the moral fiber of the entertainment industry. Mitchum was sentenced to 60 days in a Los Angeles County jail. Yet, despite the scandal, he remained unfazed, maintaining his signature cool demeanor. While in jail, Mitchum took the situation in stride. Rather than seeing it as a downfall, he later reflected on it with the nonchalance of someone who had been around the block. He even joked that the whole thing was the best thing that ever happened to me, as it ultimately gave him a bad boy image that fit perfectly with the roles he was known for. The arrest didn't mark the end of Mitchum's career. Instead, he would go on to become one of Hollywood's most respected and enduring stars, known for both his powerful performances and his ability to overcome personal scandals.
Hey, can I take a rest?
Yeah, sure.
Throw me a cigarette, will you?
Number 7. Marie McDonald. Marie McDonald had always been known for her beauty. Dubbed the Body for her striking figure, she graced the screens of the 1940s and 50s, starring in light comedies and musicals. But by 1957, Hollywood had moved on, leaving her with fading fame and a string of failed marriages. Then, one night in January, she found herself at the center of a crime so bizarre it seemed straight out of a movie. It was past midnight when Marie burst into her home, hysterical and disheveled. She told her family she had been kidnapped at gunpoint outside her house in Los Angeles. According to her, 2 men had forced her into a car, blindfolded her, and taken her to a remote cabin in the desert. There, she claimed she had been held captive, bound and gagged, until she managed to escape by convincing her captors to let her use the bathroom. She had run for miles, she said, until she found a road and flagged down a passing motorist. The police were called, and soon the story was everywhere. A glamorous Hollywood actress kidnapped and held for ransom. It was the kind of sensational headline that could sell newspapers for weeks. But something didn't add up. Investigators found no signs of a struggle near her home, no ransom demand, and no clear motive for the crime. Even more suspicious, the motorist who had picked her up said she seemed oddly calm, almost as if she had been expecting to be found. Then came the whispers. Was it all a hoax? A desperate attempt to reignite a fading career? The police weren't convinced, and after days of investigation, they publicly declared the kidnapping a fabrication. Marie, humiliated, insisted she had told the truth, but her credibility was shattered. Her career never fully recovered. The press dubbed her the girl who cried kidnap, and the scandal followed her for years. She drifted through marriages, personal troubles, and struggles with addiction until, in 1965, she was found dead of an overdose at just 42. Whether she had been the victim of a real crime or the architect of her own downfall, the mystery of Marie McDonald's kidnapping remains one of Hollywood's strangest unsolved stories. Number 6. The Case of Fatty Arbuckle. Fatty Arbuckle wasn't just one of the most popular silent stars of the 1910s. He was also one of the highest paid actors. Well, that was until he got himself involved in an infamous and highly publicized murder trial. The scandal could be traced back to Labor Day in 1921. There was a lavish party teeming with distinguished guests, alcohol, and music. On that fateful day, he found himself in the company of the talented actress Virginia Rappe. By his own account, Virginia had already been complaining of fatigue and how she needed to rest. Fatty would also recount how he escorted her upstairs to a hotel room to rest and recover. No one knows for sure what happened next, but several hours later, a piercing scream echoed through the air. This, of course, prompted bystanders to rush into the room. When they did, they found Virginia lying motionless on the floor. Chaos ensued as speculation swirled that Fatty had made unwanted advances toward her. The rumor was that she had resisted these advances and by doing so had sealed her fate. Virginia's final words were reportedly, "He did this to me." And as you can imagine, it only fueled the flames of the rumors. However, Fatty maintains he was in the bathroom at the time of the incident. Sensationalist newspapers published lurid and often exaggerated accounts of the events. These certainly portrayed Arbuckle in the worst possible light. His account did not matter, though, as the case was propelled to trial. Despite the absence of signs of physical coercion and the fact that she was fully clothed when discovered, 3 lengthy trials ensued. Despite the acquittal, the lengthy and highly publicized nature of the trials had already tarnished his reputation beyond repair. The jury in the 3rd trial even issued a formal apology to Arbuckle, but the damage to his career and public image was irreversible.
Are we all slaves?
Sure.
Not me. I'm free.
You call this freedom? With bars in front of the windows?
Number 5. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton was a rising star in the 1950s, a striking beauty whose career seemed destined for greatness. She appeared in several Hollywood films, capturing the attention of audiences with her talent and allure. But behind the glamorous facade, Payton was entangled in a series of scandals and troubled relationships that would eventually define her tragic life. Her downfall began when her personal life became just as dramatic as the roles she played on screen. In the mid-1950s, Payton's love life took a dark turn when she became involved in a tumultuous affair with a man named Tom Neal, an actor whose own life was marred by violence and rage. Their relationship was full of chaos, drunken arguments, jealousy, and physical confrontations. At one point, Neal grew so angry during one of their fights that he attacked her, leaving her bruised and battered. But it was the violence that followed that shocked the world. In 1963, the news broke that Barbara Payton had been brutally beaten by Tom Neal in a fit of rage. It was so severe that she was hospitalized with broken bones and a shattered face. Yet, despite the horror she endured, Payton's connection with Neal was not severed. She was drawn back to him, even though it was clear the relationship was doomed. The tragedy didn't end there. Payton's career continued to spiral, and she sank deeper into a world of addiction, financial trouble, and abusive relationships. By the late 1960s, Payton's once promising career was in ruins, and her personal life was beyond repair. She was left with little more than memories of a brief moment in the spotlight, a tragic figure who had been consumed by the very same darkness she had tried to escape. Her story is a heartbreaking reminder of how the combination of fame, love gone wrong, and a tortured soul can lead to a life that slips away too quickly. Though she was once the subject of Hollywood's dreams, Payton's ultimate fate would be one of despair and loss. Number 4. Mabel Normand. Mabel Normand was the queen of silent comedy, a star who could light up the screen with just a glance. She worked alongside legends like Charlie Chaplin and Fatty Arbuckle, not just as a leading lady, but as a comedic genius in her own right. Off-screen, she was Hollywood's wild child. Fast cars, late-night parties, and a sharp wit that kept men on their toes. But in 1922, Mabel Normand became infamous for something far darker than slapstick comedy. On the morning of February 2nd, Hollywood's most shocking murder unfolded in a quiet Los Angeles apartment. William Desmond Taylor, one of the industry's top directors, was found dead, shot in the back. No forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a single bullet and a pile of questions. And at the center of it all, Mabel Normand. The night before his death, she had been the last known person to see Taylor alive. They shared drinks, laughed, and talked about books. Witnesses saw her leave his home just hours before he was killed. When investigators searched the scene, they found a collection of love letters, Normand's letters. The press ran wild. Was she his lover? His killer? A pawn in something bigger? Hollywood was already reeling from the Fatty Arbuckle scandal, and another crime tied to one of its biggest stars was the last thing it needed. Normand swore she had nothing to do with it. Yes, Taylor was her friend, maybe even something more. But murder? No. Then came the whispers. Taylor had been trying to pull her away from drugs. Normand had a cocaine problem, and Taylor, the gallant director, wanted to save her. Had someone in the drug underworld silenced him? Or was it something even more sinister? The police never charged Normand, but the stain on her reputation never washed away. Studios distanced themselves. Her career, once unstoppable, crumbled. By the late 1920s, the bright-eyed star who once made the world laugh was barely a footnote in Hollywood history. She died young, just 37, of tuberculosis. No convictions were ever made in the Taylor case. His murder remains unsolved, and Mabel Normand remains forever linked to a Hollywood mystery that refuses to fade. If you made it this far, do hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates from us.
Oh brother, there's the devil to pay. The trouble with me is I'm troubled over you.
Number 3. Spade Cooley. Spade Cooley had everything: money, fame, and the title of King of Western Swing. In the 1940s and 50s, his music filled dance halls, his face lit up on television screens, and Hollywood stars lined up to be in his orbit. He wasn't just a musician. He was a force, a cowboy with a fiddle who could make crowds stomp and cheer like no one else. But behind the dazzling suits and slick stage presence, there was a darkness in Spade Cooley, a rage simmering just beneath the surface. And one April night in 1961, that darkness exploded into something unspeakable. His marriage to Ella Mae Evans had been unraveling for years. She was beautiful, devoted, and had been with him since the early days. But as Cooley's temper grew more violent, she had become afraid. He drank too much, he lashed out too easily, and she wanted out. More than that, she had found the courage to tell him. But that would prove to be a mistake. Cooley became convinced that she had been unfaithful. Whether it was true didn't matter. What mattered was that in his mind, she had betrayed him, and for that, she had to suffer. On April 3rd, inside their Mojave Desert home, he confronted her. His accusations turned to shouting, then to violence. It wasn't just a beating, it was brutality. He didn't stop with his fists. He stomped on her, breaking ribs, shattering bones. The attack went on for hours, leaving her battered and gasping for breath. But the worst part? Their 14-year-old daughter saw it all. She was there, frozen in horror, as her father turned his rage into something monstrous. When it was over, Cooley wiped the sweat from his brow, looked his daughter in the eyes, and gave her an order. "You're going to tell them your mother fell in the bathtub." But the truth was written all over Ella Mae's body. There was no covering up what he had done. When the police arrived, the King of Western Swing had no song to sing, no fiddle to play, no charm left to hide behind. His daughter, trembling but brave, told the truth in court. The trial was a spectacle. The newspapers feasted on every sordid detail, and when the verdict came, it was swift, guilty of first-degree murder.
The law?
I never saw the law fall on his face before.
Didn't fall on my face. You know, there's an old saying in the British Army. The law must always save its face in front of the nation.
Number 2. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was the definition of Hollywood glamour. The devilish grin, the effortless charm, the kind of man who could steal your heart with a wink and a well-timed quip. On screen, he was the dashing rogue, Robin Hood, Captain Blood, the swashbuckling hero who always saved the day. Off-screen, he was just as legendary. The parties, the women, the wild nights that never seemed to end. But in 1942, the golden boy of Hollywood found himself in the kind of trouble no amount of charm could fix. 2 teenage girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley, accused him of something unthinkable. They said he had taken advantage of them, used his power and fame to seduce them in ways they were too young to understand. The newspapers had a field day. Errol Flynn, movie star, heartthrob, accused predator. The trial was the spectacle of the year. Flynn walked into court like he was stepping onto a movie set, dressed to the nines, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. But the accusations were serious. Hansen claimed he had taken her to a party in the Hollywood Hills where he poured her champagne until she was dizzy, then took her upstairs. Satterley told a similar story, saying Flynn had promised her adventure, taken her on his yacht, and left her with scars instead of memories. Flynn's lawyers worked fast, painting the girls as gold diggers, girls who wanted fame, girls who had invited the attention of a star. And in 1940s Hollywood, that was enough. The jury, a panel of mostly women, saw Errol Flynn as the dashing hero they adored on screen, not the man described in the testimony. After weeks of scandal, speculation, and headlines that sold 1 million papers, the verdict came down. Not guilty. Flynn walked free, his reputation bruised but not broken. If anything, the trial only added to his legend. The phrase "in like Flynn" became a part of pop culture, a wink to his ability to slip out of trouble unscathed. He kept drinking, kept womanizing, and kept chasing the high that fame gave him. Number 1. Ted Healey. Ted Healey was the kind of comedian who could command a room without even trying. Loud, brash, and quick with a wisecrack, he had built his career on slapstick and sarcasm, most famously as the man who created the Three Stooges. But by 1937, Healey wasn't laughing anymore. His career had stalled, his drinking had worsened, and the town that once embraced him was moving on. Then came the night that ended it all. It was December 19th, and Healey had reason to celebrate. His wife had just given birth to their first child. He wandered into the Trocadero, a glamorous nightclub on the Sunset Strip, looking for a drink and maybe a few friendly faces. What happened next remains murky, but one thing is certain. Before the night was over, Ted Healey was beaten so badly that he never recovered. Some say it started over an argument. Others claim it was an unprovoked attack. Witnesses later whispered that 3 young men, possibly actors, had been involved. One name that kept surfacing was Wallace Beery, a Hollywood star known for playing rough, tough characters on screen, and, if rumors were true, off-screen as well. There were also whispers about Pat DiCicco, a well-connected Hollywood agent with ties to the mob, and Albert Cubby Broccoli, the man who would later produce the James Bond films. Healey stumbled away from the fight, bruised and bloody, but still breathing. He made it home, but something was wrong. By the next day, he was dead. Officially, the cause was listed as nephritis, kidney failure brought on by years of drinking. But those who had seen him after the fight had their doubts. Had the beating killed him? And if so, had the studio system helped cover it up? No charges were ever filed. Beery, suspiciously, left the country for a vacation in Europe almost immediately. DiCicco and Broccoli never faced serious questioning. The whole thing faded, another Hollywood mystery swept under the rug. Ted Healey, the man who brought the world the Three Stooges, was buried quietly. His name slowly disappeared, and his legacy was overshadowed by the act he had created. And as for the men who may have had a hand in his death, they kept working. Their stars continued to rise. Familiar with any other scandals in Hollywood? Do let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. You also can't miss the video on screen.